The thumbs up. One moment. Good to go.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody, to our Friday Tech Talk. I'm Forrest from the Tech Academy. We are joined today by Lindsay Wardell, 2018 graduate. We are very excited for this talk today. She's going to be talking about her journey in coding since she graduated and even before, and the importance of networking and side projects, which we all understand are incredibly important aspects of your job search and landing a job and a successful career in the industry. So I'm gonna let Lindsay kind of take over. We're gonna save questions for the end. So if you have anything you'd like to ask her, go ahead and save those for the end and we'll save some time for that. But Lindsay, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, thank you, Forrest.
Of course.
Hello, everybody. Like I was introduced, I'm Lindsay Wardell, pronouns are she, her. I'm very excited to be here talking about the journey I went on. In particular, I'll be focusing on after the Tech Academy up until today, but kind of talking about my experience in programming in general. So as noted, Lindsay Wardell. I am currently a software engineer at a company called This.Labs. We're a consultancy working with companies large and small to either help with staff augmentation or just however they need help with, or wherever they need help with, I should say. Currently working with a few different clients on various projects. They're all very exciting and fun to work on. I also am a host on the show Views on Vue. It's a podcast focusing on the Vue JavaScript framework. We also talk about programming in general, but tend to focus on Vue. And more recently, I've been a part of the Modern Web podcast, which is put out by This.Media, same company at This.Labs. But that's more of a general focus show on the modern web ecosystem, not just a single framework. So it's been a lot of fun to be a part of those. So we'll just get right into it and talk about side projects. So for context, when I started at the Tech Academy, I'd had some experience with programming at the beginning. When I was in high school, I experimented with things like HTML, CSS, PHP. When I went to college, I tried learning C++ and completely fell on my face. It made zero sense. And then I tried learning C++ again, and it still made no sense. So I just decided programming isn't for me, even though I can do HTML, CSS, and PHP. I just didn't think it worked for me. When I started at the Tech Academy, I realized, oh, actually, I can program. This is great. I love this, and I'm going to do it as my career. So I was able to pivot from being a manager at a small freight forwarding company into a developer role at that company. And one of the things that really helped me as I was making that transition was side projects. The real difficulty when thinking about side projects is first, what am I going to learn? Because we're not just wanting to build something for the sake of building it. We're wanting to get something out of it. At least I am. When I'm building something, I typically want to learn a specific technology, or I want to learn a new programming paradigm, a new framework, something along those lines. So what am I going to learn is my first question, thinking about side projects. And the other part is, what am I going to build? So using JavaScript as an example, I'm going to learn JavaScript. What am I going to build with JavaScript so that I can learn the thing I'm going to learn? And the first question was the hardest. What am I going to learn, especially straight out of the Tech Academy? I'm not 100% familiar with the curriculum at this point, but at the time, there was a strong focus on .NET, C#, building ASP.NET applications. There was some focus on CSS with Bootstrap and jQuery, but the big focus was .NET. And so I was thinking, am I going to continue learning .NET? Is this the direction I want to go? I had a friend at the time who had mentioned some JavaScript frameworks that sounded interesting, in particular React. And I believe at this point React is covered, at least in part, at the Tech Academy. But at the time it was not a major focus. So I was thinking, oh, should I learn React? This seems kind of important. It's made by Facebook. That's kind of cool. Oh, wait, there's another framework called Vue. What's the difference? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Oh no, there's another one. There's Angular. Wait, so I started thinking, so if I'm gonna be focusing on the front end, I need to learn one of these. Do I need to learn all of them? What does this look like? Oh no, now there's another front end language. There's TypeScript. For those who aren't aware, TypeScript is a more strongly typed version of JavaScript. And oh no, now there's Node. Oh, okay, so now I can do JavaScript on the back end too. And this thought process just kept going. I don't know if any of you have discovered Udemy at this point, But at the time that I was going through this process of trying to decide what I was going to learn, I just started buying all the courses I could on Udemy. So I started getting ones on React and Vue, on Angular, on TypeScript, on Node, on Electron, building desktop applications with JavaScript. Or should I not so focus on JavaScript? Maybe I should go back to the backend. I had some PHP experience. Maybe I should learn Laravel. Laravel is a backend framework similar to ASP.NET, but using PHP. Should I look at mobile development? There's Flutter, there's Java, if I want to learn how to do Android applications. There's Swift if I want to build iOS application. There's just so many options. What am I going to learn? So I eventually narrowed it down, and I was going to focus on two technologies in particular, Node and Vue. I picked these because I wanted to learn JavaScript, and I wanted to get really, really good at it. By using Node on the back end and Vue on the front end, I'm able to use a single language across the entire stack. I don't need to worry as much about using larger tools like Visual Studio. I don't need to worry about Microsoft-specific bundling with my applications. I can just write JavaScript. I can deploy it to a number of different places. It's easy to run on my own computer. So great. That's what I'm going to focus on. So now that I decided I was going to learn Vue, how am I going to learn this? What am I going to do to actually go through the process of learning the Vue framework? One of the nice things about Vue is it provides you single-page applications. I'm able to handle everything on the client side. I can use JavaScript fairly easily because I'm bundling my template and my scripts and the style all into single file components. And I'm able to compose this application pretty easily. So this seems all really cool. What am I going to do to actually learn Vue as a framework? Let's make a game. In my pre-programming time, I'd been very interested in building fan games using non-code tools. So for me, starting to dive into game design using the web technologies that I'd been learning sounded like an interesting idea. This is unfortunately not the one that I made at the time. This is a later iteration. But I'd been making this card game for a while, and I had image files. So I decided, well, can I get these into a browser? Can I get a bare minimum experience? And I did. I was able to have a lot of fun with this project. I was able to get it working with multiplayer, and I was able to also explore some back-end concepts using Node, like WebSockets, or with Node in particular, I was able to connect servers on a local area network as opposed to just going over the web. And this game was bundled into an Electron application, so I was building desktop applications using JavaScript. This gave me a huge amount of experience in various technologies and various methods of building programs that I was then able to use at work. As I mentioned, I was working at a freight forwarding company called Lindsay Forwarders, unrelated, not the same Lindsay. And I was able to take an application that was originally built in 1995 and convert it into a web-based application that all of our clients could actually connect to. Before, we were using a simple desktop app that was running on a server that was hard to maintain. It wasn't built for Windows 10. And we were able to convert that application into a full web app and meet all of our needs. We were able to create shipping documents and have instant notifications passed whenever clients made a new booking request, things like that, all of which I learned while working on that game. So the side projects, technologies that I'd been learning were directly relevant as I was working at work. So some time went by, continued working on this application. This is using Vue on the front end and Node on the back end, like I said. But if you haven't looked at the front end JavaScript ecosystem too much, you might not know that React is the most popular framework, at least at the moment. As a Vue developer, I'm hoping that changes. But I decided that I needed to learn React. So I thought, okay, how am I going to learn this? And actually, I'd tried to learn React before, and it didn't go so great. I was very lost. I was very confused. I don't have any code snippets, unfortunately, but React code compared to Vue code is very different. They achieve the same thing. They're building components to put together a single web application. But the way React goes about it is much different than Vue. Vue feels a lot more like standard HTML and CSS and JavaScript, where React goes all in its own direction. So I wasn't quite comfortable with learning React. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. As I was doing the dishes one day, this thought came to mind. You may be surprised what it is. Let's make a game. In this case, rather than going with that card game example, because that was complicated and I didn't know React at the time, so I didn't want to try and build something super complex. I decided I was just going to build a simple board game. The main concepts of the game is I would build a 9x9 grid. I would automatically determine some terrain like forests and mountains and towns. And then 2 players would build different units and try and fight for control of the board. And this idea expanded and expanded and expanded over time. Eventually, I was able to build a very basic AI that was able to analyze the board and make decisions. It wasn't super powerful, but it was there. I was able to add multiplayer support over the internet using Google Firebase or Fire something. I think it's Firebase. I was able to use their Firestore to pass JSON objects between 2 different players. So we were able to enable an online experience, which was fun. And I started working on building a map maker so that instead of having a completely random map, you were able to create your own and then save your progress in a game. This gave me a great taste of React, and I was really able to understand how it works with components. At the time, there were 2 different kinds that were used, the class-based components and functional components, so I was able to learn that difference. I had some experience with Redux, which is global state management for React. And in addition, because I was working on that project, I started working with other React technologies, one of which was Gatsby. Gatsby is a static site generator. So you're able to use React to build static assets. Rather than having to spin up an entire JavaScript single-page application, it builds the HTML for you, and then you just load that. React is then rehydrated in the client. But in general, all of your content is stored in HTML files, which makes it a lot easier to load and easier to deploy on various sites. You don't need to worry about a backend server at all. I was also able to start learning GraphQL. GraphQL is a data query language that is intended for clients and the browser to be able to make requests against a server in a way that is more declarative and strongly typed, which is very nice. Instead of using just a standard REST API where you're just making a request and hoping the data comes back in the way you want, you're able to say, this is the data I want, and the server will give it to you. Gatsby relies on GraphQL for accessing things like the file system, which is very unique. I was also able to start working with Tailwind CSS, which is a utility-first CSS framework. Rather than Bootstrap, which has components as its main focus, Tailwind just provides you with utility classes like text center, opacity 0, things like that. I'm actually using a utility-first CSS framework called Windy CSS for all of these slides. These slides are using Vue. So it's very powerful and very flexible in what it can do. I was able to start learning all of these because of that side project. I was later able, at my next job at Daimler Trucks North America, to build a React application using Tailwind because I was able to have this experience with the side project of making a game. However, on that project at Daimler, I also decided to use TypeScript. I specifically wanted to do that because it is a strongly typed superset of JavaScript. So I'm able to use all of the tooling that exists, all of the JavaScript frameworks and libraries that exist, and have some more understanding of what the data flow is like in my application. So how am I going to learn TypeScript? What am I going to do to get really good at this? I bet you don't know what I'm going to do. Let's make a game. In this case, instead of building something in the UI, because I didn't care about the UI at this point, I built a command line interface for my game. I rewrote the entire engine in TypeScript and then created the CLI to render out the board. And I was able to make some changes to the game along the way. I can now support multiple players. I now support different building types. So here I have citadels. In the previous version, I had castles only. You can build out different kinds of units. You can build out different kinds of buildings. So it was a lot of fun, and I was able to learn TypeScript. I was able to get some of its concepts, like interfaces, which are familiar if you're using C#. And it just gave me a great learning experience. I was also able to use this version of the game engine to try loading it in different front-end frameworks. So I was able to port this into Vue. I was able to port this into another JavaScript framework called Svelte. It was just this great experience that allowed me to try out different things, learn new ways of programming, and really build myself as a developer. And then I learned about Elm. If you haven't heard of Elm, Elm is a delightful language for reliable web applications. I have a code example here. As you can see, it does not look like C. It does not look like JavaScript. It is based on a language called Haskell, which is another purely functional language. And this is a language that compiles to JavaScript and helps you make websites and web applications in a way that is a lot more secure. One of the guarantees of Elm is that if you build your application in Elm, you will have no runtime exceptions. I'm not sure how familiar you are with JavaScript, but one of the common jokes in JavaScript is undefined is not a function is very common. That's not possible in Elm. Elm makes sure that all of your code will work, 100% of it. If you're reliant on an HTTP request or you need to work with JavaScript inside of that, you might get some errors. But within the Elm code itself, you're not going to get errors. The compiler will not let you compile if something could go wrong. So how am I going to learn this? This is extremely complicated. This is a lot different than anything I've ever done. All of the programming I've done before is very much in the imperative form. It's object-oriented. What am I going to do to learn this? So I thought about it. I tried some different ideas. But in the end, I had an idea. Let's make a game. And I just continued working on the same game that I was doing. I rewrote the entire game in Elm. And what I learned were the benefits of functional programming. I was able to get into this mindset of Elm and just think about my code in a different way. I was able to learn more about recursion, about making smaller functions. That's one of the main benefits of functional programming is it forces you into these smaller functions. And I was also able to learn more about mutation and mutability versus immutability, concepts that are important as you're working on front-end applications. And I made a really cool game at the same time. Still not complete. This is the current version. But my daughter and I can sit down and we can enjoy this. It's a lot of fun. So one point that I'd like to make though is why did I do the same project? Each time I was learning a framework or a language or a tool, I kept making the same game. I just made some tweaks to it. The main piece that I got out of that was I was using the same core logic. I knew I needed to render a 9x9 grid. I had to put some trees, I had to put some mountains on, I needed to put some buildings, and I needed to allow the user to move units around the board and fight each other. Most of the logic was going to be the same in each of these tools. So rather than think about what am I going to build, I was able to think, how am I going to build it using this? How am I going to build it in React? How am I going to build it in TypeScript? How am I going to learn it in Elm? Also, it's just an interesting project. Like I said, I had an interest in games from a very young age. And I was able to take that interest and put it into learning a side project or building a side project and learning at the same time. A lot of times looking at lists of, here's some example side projects you could build, they weren't interesting to me. I don't want to build a to-do app. That's not interesting to me. Building a game, that's interesting. That's something I can get invested in. And I could spend hours working on it and learning at the same time. And finally, it's that freedom to learn. I'm choosing the project that I want to build. I'm not just following a tutorial. I'm not following a guide. This isn't a game that anyone else has made. This is a game that I made. So I have that opportunity to both build what I want to build and learn whatever tool that I want to learn. And so I went through different versions. And each time that the game was rebuilt, I was able to learn more. I became a better developer. And the game itself has been improved. I'm currently working on a new version using a backend language called Elixir. It's not ready to show, unfortunately. I've just got the grid loading at this point. But it's a lot of fun just porting all of this logic that was in the front end into the back end now and kind of taking it from that side. My goal is to make it so it can be played via multiplayer again. That hasn't been supported since the first version. If anyone is interested in looking at the game, that's the URL right there, which I can share later as well. It is fully playable if you go to that URL. You don't need to sign in or anything. You just create the players that you want and go at it. There is no tutorial. I apologize. So far, it's just been me playing, so haven't had to teach myself. So that is side projects. And now we're going to move a bit into networking. Thank you for putting that in the chat. So now we're going to go a bit into networking. And I'm actually not going to talk just about networking. I'm going to talk about learning in public, because that's what I feel is one of the key ways to actually network. You can always go to meetups. You can always be talking to people. But one of the best ways that I've seen people build up a network around them of either other developers who are learning or just trying to get that first job or that second job or that third job even, is learning together, sharing what you're learning in public. Taking from a blog post that I really like, I'll share the link for that at the end of this. Some ideas you can do to learn in public: blogs and tutorials and cheat sheets. A large number of people who are brand new to programming will start writing up blogs saying, hey, I ran into this problem. This is how I solved it. There's always somebody who doesn't know as much as you. And by writing up what you know, you can share your knowledge with them. And if you ever forget it, you can always go back and find it. A number of developers that I follow will talk about how they've been Googling for something, and they'll find their own blog post explaining how to do it. They can thank their past selves for writing it. Speaking at meetups and conferences. Again, there are people who don't know as much as you, and they can benefit from your experience. Also, you just have a different perspective on how to do programming, how to approach these concepts. So by speaking at meetups, going to conferences and giving talks, you'll be able to share what you know with others and hopefully help the programming community, developer community, continue to grow and expand. Ask and answer things on Stack Overflow or Reddit. I'll include Twitter on this one. That's where I get most of my good interactions. Making YouTube videos or Twitch streams. There are a large number of developers I follow who will go on Twitch or whatever streaming platform you prefer, and they will just live stream themselves coding. One developer that I follow, Debbie O'Brien, she used to be a developer at Nuxt, which is a Vue framework. And so she knew all about Vue. She didn't know React. As she's been learning React, she is sharing her experience in blog posts, in Twitch streams, very obviously showing her growth, as well as where she's not as familiar with React, until she's now at the point where she's able to build React applications and she feels comfortable again. Starting a newsletter. Again, just sharing things that you learn, sharing things that you find interesting. Great way to build up a network of people that are interested in what you're doing. And you can then drive that to have conversations. Another way is drawing cartoons. People like cartoons. So if you are able to draw, or you're able to create flowcharts or just something visually interesting in regards to the programming that you're doing, this is a great option for sharing that. So there's the link to the blog post. I can put that in the chat or not. It won't let me select it. Figures. That's by Sean Wang, who goes by Swix on Twitter. And he's actually written a book about going from junior to a senior developer. If you go to his website, you'll find information on it. And he's an excellent resource for talking about these kinds of things. Highly recommend that. Okay. Another couple resources that are good for building a network as well as sharing your knowledge and learning in public. One of them is dev.to. This is a blogging platform, if you're not familiar, that lets you write blog posts about anything you're doing in programming. They also do conversations called Dev Discuss, where developers of all levels of experience can share their opinions on different topics. Like, how do you feel about tabs versus spaces is a bare minimum example. But also, what is your opinion of single page applications? Are we needing to go back more towards the server? Just really interesting conversations. And they have a couple different podcasts that they do as well, where they share those conversations with their listening audience. But this is a great way that anyone can write blog posts and get them out to people. And again, at bare minimum, maybe you'll thank yourself in the future. And my personal favorite example is going to Twitter. This is a post I put up on Twitter earlier this week. And it was just to start a conversation. I wanted to know how people were using Vue in a particular way. So I was able to have that conversation on Twitter. In very short order, there were a large number of people sharing their experiences, sharing their opinions, sharing their ideas on how to write code in Vue in particular. And one of the great parts about Twitter is you'll get some of those big name developers. Like in this case, Evan Yu, the creator of the Vue framework, came in and commented on some of these threads. And you don't need to be a super well-known developer to have a conversation on Twitter. Just start having a conversation, responding to people. There are so many developers who are just starting out on their journeys, who are having good conversations on Twitter and building up a great network of other developers who are like-minded. A couple tags that you can use on Twitter is 100 days of code. If you're doing the 100 days of code challenge, which as it sounds is just writing code for 100 days and posting about it on Twitter, just constantly sharing what you're learning, what you're doing. And then also code nudies, which they tend to go hand in hand, but just talking about what you're doing, asking other people who are at the same point in their journey as you, what is it that you like? How do you do X? What are you interested in? It's really fun to see some of these developers just building up communities around these topics. Coming back to me personally, one of the best ways that I found to network for myself is podcasting. So at the end of 2019, the network that this show is a part of, devchat.tv, had a number of openings for hosts. And I was able to apply and join. And after my interview, the owner of the network, Chuck, said, great, well, you have some really good experience. Let's put you on the Views on Vue show. We'll do it for a couple episodes, see how it goes. And if you're a good fit, then we'll keep doing that. And it was a good fit. I had a lot of fun on the podcast, got to talk to some interesting people. I've made a lot of great friends just by being a part of this show. There's a developer named Adam Wathen, who's the creator of Tailwind CSS. He also has a podcast, although it's not had many episodes recently, called Full Stack Radio. And he admitted early in the show, he created it specifically so he could invite people on to talk about cool things. One of the, not sure the right wording, one of the best, no, let me back that up. Something that can be frustrating to developers who are more established is when somebody will come to me and like, hey, can I grab a coffee with you? Can I have a chat? Can I pick your brain? Because they don't know what the situation is going to be. They don't know what's actually going on. But if you have something like a podcast, or you have some sort of hook that they would be interested in, say, hey, can I interview you on my podcast? Can you come onto my podcast and talk with me? There's a good chance they'll say yes, because they're going to have an opportunity to talk about what they're interested with. It's going to be shared in a public space, and you get to have that great conversation. And I've had that same experience on Views on Vue. I've been able to talk to developers from the Vue core team. I've been able to talk to people from the Nuxt core team. Currently, one of our panelists is actually from the Quasar team as well, which is another Vue framework. So it's a lot of fun and a great way to meet a whole bunch of different people and just see what's going on in the JavaScript ecosystem from my perspective. At the time when I joined the podcast, I was working at Daimler Trucks, and this was pre-pandemic, so I was working down at Montgomery Park in Northwest Portland. And that made things a little difficult. I had to do the podcast from my car because I wasn't able to do it I didn't have an office. I was just working at it was kind of an open space. So I didn't have a private area I could go to do the recording. After the pandemic hit, I was able to start working from home. And that's my daughter's artwork that she would give me to put up. I was able to do it at home. I was able to get more into it because I'm not just in that confined space. Like I said, I just had a lot of great conversations talking with people and discussing JavaScript, discussing Vue, seeing where the future would go with all of these things. And I just did my best to get my name out there on Twitter. I followed up with all of the guests and said, thank you for coming on the show. Just started building up this network of people that both knew my skill and I knew theirs, and we could collaborate on things and ask questions of each other. And then as the pandemic wore on and the company was a bit more stressed due to not being familiar with work from home, many of the development teams had been cut. I found myself looking for a new job. I was not particularly satisfied where I was working, and I wanted something new. So I found the company that I work at today, This.Labs, partially because of online meetups that I'd also been participating in. This.Labs has their media wing, This.Media, and they do React meetups, Vue meetups, Angular, GraphQL, and a whole bunch of other YouTube content that they put out. And I was participating in some of that while I was doing work from home. It's a lot easier to participate when I'm not at the office. And I saw that they're hiring. Like, great, this sounds like a cool place to work. One of the descriptions in their job was being able to do podcasts and give talks and participate in the community. I was like, oh, this is excellent. I love this. This is what I've been doing. So I applied. And part of why I got this job, I know, is because of that work I did in the Views on Vue podcast and trying to build myself up as a member of the Vue community online. I was specifically told by the woman I was interviewing with that they wanted to push that for me and get me further into the Vue ecosystem, get me further into the community at large. So that continued. And a couple weeks ago, I was able to participate in a conference called the Vue Global Summit, which was an online conference. And I was able to talk about all of those things that I'd been learning from my side projects. In this case, my topic was upgrading Vue 3 to TypeScript. And I know for myself and in my career, I wouldn't have been able to do this both without the side projects, without that constant churn in that specific project, that game, as well as without the networking, building up that group of people that could vouch for me and I'd be able to ask questions and just have a conversation with. That's really how I got to where I am today, is working on those two sides of my career. For those who remember Miss Frizzle from the 90s in particular, there were three things that she would say in both the books and the TV show. It's take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. And that's really the best way that I found to be a developer and learning in public. Just try new things, learn new tools, build side projects, rebuild the side projects. Just find any way that you can to learn and expand yourself as a developer. Share it in public. It's okay if you're wrong. If somebody comes to you and says you're wrong online, great, maybe you are, and you can learn from this person. At least at bare minimum, you can understand something that they understand and they want you to know. And just do whatever you can to grow your career, grow your knowledge, grow your experience. I've only been working professionally as a developer since 2017, 2018. I know I have a lot more to learn. I have a lot more that I can do, but I've made great strides in my career just by taking these kinds of steps. So I'm willing to bet that any of you who are watching this could also make those same kinds of steps and have a very successful career as well. So my question for you would be, what are you going to build next? And that is where I will end my talk.
Well, that was fantastic, Lindsay. We really appreciate you sharing that with us. I mean, it seems like you've come a long way since the start. And I mean, I personally learned a lot just now, gave me a lot of ideas. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. At this point, we can open it up for questions. If anybody has a question for Lindsay, they are welcome to, you can either ask it in the chat box, or you can click that little hand raise button to raise your hand, and we will call on you. I've got a question while everybody else maybe is thinking about it. Why? So you mentioned that you were kind of overwhelmed, which I've firsthand experienced. A lot of people have experienced when there's a million things to learn. What do I focus in on? And you pick JavaScript and Vue. Why JavaScript? Why was that the language you decided to go in on? Was that just you're most familiar, or you enjoyed it the most? What was the kind of pull there?
The main reason I went with JavaScript as my main focus was I felt like JavaScript could be used for anything, which is very true. You can use JavaScript to build front-end applications. You can use using Vue or React or Angular, any of those tools. You can use JavaScript to build back-end applications with Node or any of the other tools that build on top of Node, or you can even use other runtimes like Deno.
Mhm.
You can build mobile applications using React Native or Native Script. You can build serverless functions using AWS Lambda. There's so much potential using a JavaScript, using the JavaScript ecosystem to build anything, that it felt like a very, very comfortable choice as far as for my next programming language to learn for the next direction that I wanted to take my career.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's my favorite language, so that I can completely see that and agree with that. We got a couple questions in the chat. Ricardo Lopez, which maybe you just kind of answered, but we'll go over it anyway. Lindsay, you talked about using games to learn new languages, but how did you decide what languages to learn? Was there anything else, any other languages besides, I mean, you mentioned TypeScript, but anything else besides JavaScript that you decided you need to learn to accomplish that?
So I'm going to expand that to frameworks just to make sure I'm covering all the bases. When I was learning, backing up, before I learned Vue, I tried to get a read on what the front end single page application ecosystem was like, and I saw primarily there's either Angular, React, or Vue. Those were the big three at the time, and there's still the big three. There's some more competing for space, but those are the three dominant platforms right now, or the dominant frameworks right now, I should say. And when I was looking at it, I narrowed it down to either React or Vue. Angular felt uncomfortable. I don't remember 100% why, but I narrowed it down to React and Vue. I tried out React, didn't like it. I tried out Vue, it felt more comfortable. So that was really what made me decide to start learning Vue as my first front-end framework in JavaScript. It felt comfortable. I was able to be productive fairly quickly. The concepts that were used in it made a lot of sense. And so I was able to just start there. I knew at some point I would need to learn React because like I said, React is the most popular framework right now. And I figured if I was going to get a job, or get my next job, I should say, I would need to know React in order to do that. So that's kind of how I made that decision.
Are you using Vue in your current position then?
Yes. So for my front-end work, I'm using primarily Vue. I do use some React still. This.dot has a number of clients that use both Vue and React and Angular.
Wow.
But I tend to be more on the Vue projects. So that's what I've been using primarily at work.
Gotcha.
When I was at Daimler Trucks, we were also using Vue.
Which you kind of brought to the table, right? Because they had been, or was this the previous company that had the legacy code base that you?
The legacy code base was Lindsay Forwarders.
Gotcha.
They had nothing, and I introduced Vue. When I came into Daimler Trucks, originally I was being hired for a Node and Vue position. My first project there actually turned into a React position using TypeScript. But the second team I was on was completely using Vue for the front end.
Gotcha.
Fun side tangent real quick before we keep going on questions.
No, please go ahead.
The Daimler Trucks position, I was, like I said, I was originally hired for using Vue and Node. Within 1 week of that job, it turned out they really wanted a Java developer, not a JavaScript developer. I was entertained at the time, as well as now, that that joke about Java and JavaScript being confused actually played out, and I was actually hired for the role. Luckily, the Java that they needed, I was able to learn fairly quickly. It wasn't anything too complex. So I was able to learn it on my feet. And then by the time I got to my second role at Daimler, I was comfortable enough in Java to keep the job.
That is hilarious. Yeah, that's something that I would see myself falling into. I got corrected several times by developers for using Java because I thought it was just the shorthand for JavaScript, but that's really funny.
It's great. It's a great story.
That's really good. A couple more questions in the chat here. KM has been self-studying, but doesn't know where to start. Seems like they're never getting ahead. They're wondering if you would recommend JavaScript as a good place to start, a good starting language.
If you're getting into programming for logic and things like that, I think JavaScript is an excellent place to get started. I would highly recommend getting a good foundation with HTML and CSS first. All three of those languages complement each other for building an entire application. So if you start with JavaScript and you don't really know HTML and you don't really know modern CSS, you're still going to find yourself running into roadblocks. Whereas you can start with both of those without having to worry about backend or logic at all. So HTML and CSS get a firm foundation, then dive into JavaScript. Once you get fairly comfortable with the basics of JavaScript, I would say it's okay to jump into a framework. You can either go more into learning all of JavaScript and just kind of getting a foundation in that, or start being productive. Just get straight into a framework, build out a single page application. It doesn't have to be great. You'll learn as you go. I think both of those approaches make sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. Thanks for the question, Cam. Carly mentioned, asks, other than games and websites, are there other types of projects for learning? Maybe other projects that you'd recommend? Obviously, games seems like what your go-to, but anything else you'd recommend?
Anything that relies on, so my go-to, let me back up. I see myself more as a full stack developer rather than just a front end or a back end developer. And because of that, I look for projects that tend to work across the entire stack, where I'll need a server, where I'll need that kind of connection in the back. So for me, when I'm thinking of a project, I try to find something that I'll be able to do a full process on, where I need to sign in as a user. I'll need to read data from the database. I'll need to update and delete data. And that way I get to practice building an API. I get to practice sending data over an internet connection. And then I just try and find something interesting to build in the front. It's not super straightforward because I am wanting to try and push myself and grow as a developer. A couple of good examples. I mean, I mentioned that this one didn't interest me in particular, but to-do apps are a great example of something that you can build in any framework that gives you experience with the basics of each of those. There's a project out there, To-Do MVC, that is a great example of building out a to-do app in every single front-end framework and some back-end frameworks. Occasionally, it'll be used as a metric for how good a framework is or a library is at building out a user interface. So to-do apps, some of the other side projects I worked on, I built CLIs just for fun, just to see what I could do. Building tools that help you as a developer are also good examples. So I can't name any specific one for you. For me, when I was working at Daimler Trucks, I needed a tool to reset a database back to a specific starting point based on certain input. I didn't want to just keep opening up, in that case, we were using SQL Studio. I didn't want to keep running it, just the SQL script directly. So I wrote a CLI first that would let me reset it. Then I expanded that into an Electron application. Then I expanded that into an Electron application using Svelte. And it just kept growing from there. And eventually it actually became a core piece of my team's work stack until we were finally able to deprecate it. But that's where a lot of my side projects come from. It's just having that initial interest, that initial need on my own side, and then figuring out how do I do it, and just breaking that down into the smallest pieces possible and working step by step.
Forrest, I'm going to jump in with a quick question.
Absolutely.
Lindsay, you said you took some courses in college for coding, and it really wasn't making sense for you. You were kind of discouraged. What made it click for you when you came to the Tech Academy?
The main thing for me that clicked was not being in C++, honestly. Before college and before the Tech Academy, I'd explored PHP, and I felt actually pretty comfortable in it, but it never clicked that I was programming. I didn't think I could actually make money off of this. I just thought, oh, it's PHP. Nobody makes money off of PHP. That is a lie. You can make money off of PHP, and that is a great language to learn as a developer. But I was going through a traditional CS path. And as part of that, I needed to learn C++. And it just did not make sense. I couldn't figure out why I was doing what I was doing. And none of it worked with how my brain was trying to understand things. So I just set it all aside. And when I started at the Tech Academy, I at the time, it was starting with HTML and CSS, getting to a bit of JavaScript. I touched JavaScript for the first time after years. I'd looked at it briefly and thought, yeah, that's weird. And it just made sense. I don't know if it was the way the Tech Academy was teaching it or just the project I was working on. It was a pizza pricing tool. But it all made sense. And I was like, oh, this is good. I like this. I can program. And I was able to build out things without following any guides because I had learned it and it made sense. And from there, I was just able to expand and start working on other projects.
Awesome.
Yeah, that pizza project was a clicking point for me as well. Lindsay, we still on the curriculum, or at least was when I was the program. And
yeah, I remember that. I remember that one.
Another fun story, when I was applying at Daimler Trucks, the guy who interviewed me had actually printed out my source code for that and handed it to me and said, what would you change today?
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was an excellent interview question, because I was able to analyze my own code and see how I had grown as a developer as well. It just gave me that opportunity to reflect.
That is cool.
That's a great question. I like that a lot. I'm going to totally botch this name. I apologize. Abhajit Kale asks, what are your future plans?
Oh, that's a good question. At the moment, my future plans are to continue growing in the Vue community in particular, and in the JavaScript community at large. Doing more talks, hopefully going to more conferences as things start opening again, attending meetups, and just participating and sharing my knowledge. As a developer, I mean, I just started my job, so I'm not thinking about the next one. But as a developer, just continuing to develop my skills and establish myself as an authority, in my case, on the Vue framework and the Vue ecosystem, so that when I am ready for the next job, or the next job really wants to hire me, I'll have that credential on my name saying, this is somebody who knows Vue. This is somebody who knows how to teach. This is somebody who knows how to help other developers grow. That would be my goal right now. I'd also say more blogging. I've been doing blogging as part of my position at this.labs. Just like to continue that. I really enjoy writing, really enjoy sharing the knowledge that I have with others.
And will we see your games on the Play Store and Apple Store?
That's the plan. Currently just working out how the back end is going to work using Elixir. Once that's in place, it can start growing it towards the app stores.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Looks like we've got two more quick questions. If we got a little bit of time left. Good questions too. I was curious myself. When you're learning a new language or a framework, or whatever project you're working on, what's your approach for learning that new skill? You mentioned Udemy at the beginning. Is that like a go-to resource?
It was at the beginning. It's less so now. At this point, I tend to more follow either blogs or just read the documentation, because I have that core familiarity with the programming concepts that are being used. The biggest hurdle was learning Elm, because that was using functional programming as opposed to object-oriented. So it was a completely different paradigm. And for that one, I bought a book, which I have right here. I'll plug it. Elm in Action by Richard Feldman. It's an excellent book for learning Elm and functional programming in general. But I think my typical approach is making sure I'm comparing and contrasting what I'm learning with what I already know. So using React as an example, I already learned Vue. I already understood how Vue works and some of its functionality. As I was learning React, I was able to look at their concepts and say, oh, this is how I do X, but in React. For state management, for example, in Vue, you use a data property in the component. And you can also get the book straight from Manning, and then you can have a digital version.
Oh, even better.
So,
sorry, I don't mean to plug Amazon. I think it's even better. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Manning is a great resource, by the way, if you are somebody who learns great with books. They have their Manning Early Access program that also lets you give back to the authors as they're writing the book, and you can provide feedback to them.
That's great.
So as I was learning Vue, and I learned about state management and the data property and their single file components, I was able to look at React and say, oh, use state is equivalent to data. Or if I'm using a class component, the state and set state is equivalent to data. So that's a very basic example, but it's basically what I would do for all of these different frameworks and languages, is just ask, how do I do this in that language? But in that language's way. I don't want to just force like the view paradigm onto React, or I don't want to force the object-oriented paradigm onto Elm. I want to learn it the way I'm supposed to do it. And so as I would learn concepts, I would say, this is how I do X, but in Y. And that would help it stick in my brain more. Unfortunately, it would also cross-contaminate my knowledge. So sometimes when I'm doing a lot of functional programming and I go back to object-oriented, I keep writing it in a functional way, which then confuses OO developers.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing about that. I think that's really valuable. Do you have any, when you were first learning, did you have like a go-to like Udemy instructor that you really liked, or was it just kind of general? Anybody you remember that was stood out for those early kind of days?
I can't pronounce the name. It is German. It's Maximilian Schwarzmüller from Academind. Put Academind in the chat there. He has a whole series of courses on everything. He's got a Node course, he's got a React course, a Vue course, an Angular course, a Next course. I think he's got a GraphQL course. He's got one on progressive web apps. He's got one on CSS3. Any concept that you want to know as a newer developer, he'll have a course for it. And if he doesn't, he has YouTube videos on it that are free.
Wow.
So excellent resource to go to. And he's just so friendly. He's one of those voices that I can just listen to in the background and just enjoy it. And I'm learning at the same time that I'm doing something else. So highly recommend Maximilian Schwarzmüller.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. Like somebody you can listen to and not get tired of hearing them for 8 hours at a time.
Right.
Last question we have here in the chat. Ricardo Lopez asked, did you use any of your games on your portfolio resume when you were looking for jobs?
Yes. Not on my current version of the site, which is more blog focused, but on my previous portfolio, I had a few different projects up, one of which was the game. And I would use it to highlight I'm able to build complex things in a way that actually works and is straightforward at the end of the day. You can follow the logic that's going on, and able to approach more advanced concepts, even though I don't have any prior knowledge of how do you write an artificial intelligence for a game. Just able to tackle it myself. And so yeah, I did use the game as an example. I would say if you're looking for a development position at like an enterprise or a regular business, don't use it as your only example, but it can definitely show your creativity and your ingenuity with solving problems.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing. That looks like it's all the questions we have in the chat. Does anybody have any last minute questions they'd like to ask before we close out for the day? If not, I mean, Lindsay, this was really, truly fantastic. I really appreciate your time. I mean, I personally learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else did as well. I think if folks are interested in finding Lindsay, you can find you on LinkedIn, probably or Twitter. Obviously, it sounds like you're pretty active on Twitter.
Either Twitter or LinkedIn. I believe on both I am Lindsay K. Wardell.
Lindsay K.
And I've had a number of graduates from the Tech Academy reach out. We've had good conversations. So happy to talk. Just on whatever platform you find me, just send me a message.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we will definitely be reaching out to you. And then KM, you mentioned in the chat, what's the application process for the Tech Academy? I think the best way I'm going to put my email in here. If you want to reach out directly to me, then I can get you in touch with how to set that up. Rick, anything else you'd like to close out with?
Well, I'll put the link in for the website as well. Really good information on the website. And Lindsay, that was awesome. That was really good information. We definitely appreciate it. I've got a ton of new links for learning that I've saved to my favorites, so I will definitely be going through those. And yeah, that was great.
Excellent. Thank you. Final plug for those who are still here. If you want to learn how to build JavaScript applications that are server-side rendered, so you don't get the downsides of a client-side JavaScript application, but you get all the benefits of both, I would definitely recommend checking out Nuxt. That is the Vue server-side rendering framework. Any day now, they're going to be coming out with the Nuxt 3 beta, which has support for Vue 3. It's highly anticipated. My blog is built on Nuxt. Any project I do is typically using Nuxt. So definitely recommend checking that out. That is N-U-X-T, Nuxt.
Nuxt. Awesome.
I believe it is nuxtjs.org. Let me double check that. Yes, it is.
Excellent. Excellent. We will definitely be looking into that. Well, fantastic. Well, Lindsay, once again, thank you so much. Fantastic talk. This is going to be going up on YouTube, so if anybody wants to revisit it, you'll be able to find it there today. But yeah, thanks again, and I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend and try not to, try to stay cool out there. It's getting warm.
Yeah, definitely stay cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and yeah, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Thanks all. Thanks, Lindsay.